Hi everybody, TJ Mac Vintage Cards here, and today I'm doing a video where I'm going to show off some of my vintage magazines and some of the cards that go along with the players being depicted on the covers. Thought this would be a fun video to do because I am a vintage magazine collector as well. I inherited a large number of magazines, and I've really worked them into my collecting. And I think to become a more advanced collector, for me anyways, the magazines have helped that because it's helped me identify a lot of the players that I really didn't know made as big an impact as they did. And magazines really help do that because with card sets you get hundreds of players depicted in a card set, and it's hard to tell necessarily the impact that they've had on their sports. But with magazines, they're either put out weekly or monthly. Like in the case of Sport Magazine, which is depicted here, that's a monthly issue. So they only had 12 covers a year. So whoever they're putting on their cover really had to have some impact either on the sport that they're playing or in the larger popular culture at that time. So I find it a lot of fun to collect in this manner, to have these magazines and to also have cards associated with those covers depicted. And I do display magazines in my card room, and I have some other shelves where time to time I'll display the cards with the magazines as well, just to kind of evoke that memory or bring you back to that particular era. So the first one that I'm showing is a Sport Magazine from March 1997, and it's titled The End, and you see Namath, Simpson, and Orr. And below that you have two of the three cards that would have been the cards that were out at that time. Now, Joe Namath didn't make a card after the 73 top set for contractual reasons, I believe. But the O.J. Simpson's the 76 tops, and the Bobby Orr's the 76 tops as well. And those would have been the cards that would have been out for sale at the time that kids would have been opening packs of. So in this particular issue, it speaks to these three players. Obviously, there's some concern they're approaching the end of their career. For Broadway Joe, that was certainly the case. 77 would have been his last season with the Rams. His last great season really was in 72. And then after that, he had a couple productive years. But in 76 and 77 with the Jets and Rams, he started a total of 12 games and finished with 7 touchdowns and 21 interceptions and a 3-9 record. And then after that season in 77, he was finished by retiring at 34 years old. But with OJ, what's interesting is this turned out to be more prophetic, because in 76, OJ won his 4th rushing title. He had 1,503 yards in just 14-game season, and he had 9 touchdowns. In 1977, though, he was 30 years old, suffered a bad knee injury, I believe, about 5 games into the season with the Bills, and didn't break 1,000 yards again in his last 3 years. In fact, he only totaled 1,610 yards and 6 touchdowns from 77 to 79. 2 of those seasons he played with the 49ers. And then with Bobby Orr, he was in the midst of his second of 3 shortened seasons when this particular issue came out. And then you can see him on the Blackhawks now, even though on the cover he's showing on the Bruins. He had knee problems as well, and he only played 20 games in the 76-77 season and finished with 23 points. In his last 3 years, he only played 36 games and finished with 45 points, and he retired at the age of 30 at the end of the 1978. So that was the 3 players being depicted here. And again, the question is, the end was near for these 3 guys, or that's the answer to that question. So that's that cover. And then these magazines also show a lot of beautiful images on them. And as you can see here, I'm just going to take these cards down. You have this October 1952 Sport Magazine with Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese on the cover. And this is more just to show the wonderful artistic images you get on these magazines. And you can see that here. Beautiful Pee Wee and Jackie cards. You can see Pee Wee jumping in the air to make the double play on his card, and Jackie sliding into home. And then on this particular cover, you have Pee Wee on the bottom there. And then Jackie up in the air, suspended above him. Just a beautiful shot. And a lot of these 50s magazines just have those bold colors and just really, really sharp photography on them. And you can see the background of Ebbets Field there. So just a wonderful cover there. I'm not going to get too much into these players. Everybody knows Jackie and Pee Wee, and this is really just celebrating them as players at that time, and really 2 of the great icons in baseball, certainly during that era, and obviously beyond that, as both are Hall of Famers. So that's the Pee Wee and Jackie. And then the next one I'm going to show is a player that a lot of people might not know, but that's to kind of prove my point of how these magazines really can depict players that may not have everlasting impact on the sport, but certainly were great players of their time. And this is Del Shofner and his 61 Flair card. He started his career with the Rams, so I thought I would show that card. And this is from December 1963, the magazine, showing Del Shofner on the cover, and it called him Pro Football's Iceman. And in the article, it was talking about him being really a quiet player who sometimes lacked confidence and was really afraid of letting his teammates down. But if you look at his career, you can see that he really didn't do that. He was an excellent athlete. He was drafted by the Rams in the first round as a defensive back in 1957, and then he switched to wide receiver in 58, and he had 1,097 yards that year. And then in 1960, he went back to playing some defensive back because there were some injuries to the Rams secondary and just performance issues. And then played a more limited role as wide receiver that year and didn't have as good a season. He fell out of favor with Rams management, but the Giants wanted to sign him, so they traded for him, and he joined quarterback Y.A. Tittle, who was recently signed by the Giants to really have the best 1-2 punch in all of football from a quarterback to receiver. They just had such a chemistry and connection that from 1961 to 1963, Shofner had 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons and 33 touchdowns total. And that's just in a 12-game season. So it's really a fabulous performance by Shofner. And the Giants went to 3 straight NFL championships, but they lost all of them. And then you can see here, this is really his last great run in December 1963 when this issue was put out, because in the 64 season, he started to succumb to injuries and had bleeding ulcers, and he ended up retiring after the 67 season. But when he retired, he was a 5-time All-Pro, and he was on the All-NFL 1960s wide receiver on the first team. And unfortunately, he's not in the Hall of Fame. But he was the only receiver to have 4 1,000-yard seasons until 1981. So that really tells you the caliber of player that he is, or that he was. And really, he should have more Hall of Fame consideration. I don't think he's ever even been a finalist, which to me is a travesty because he was a fantastic player. So I wanted to share a little bit more about him. And then I'll bring up here a little closer. You can see his 1961 Flair card there. And then also the magazines can really get into the history of sports as well. And you can see here on this cover from 1975, it's got Frank Robinson on it. And he was, certainly a Hall of Fame player of his day. But in addition to that, he was also the first black manager in baseball history. And I'm going to show a 75 Topps card to go along with that. And you can see here he was a designated hitter on the card. And this was his last Topps card as a player, even though he did play some games in 1976. I think he played about 35 or 36 games in 1976. He was a player manager. And what's cool about this cover, it shows him handing in the lineup card, and then it has that really cool Indians patch on there, as you can see on his chest. And it says from MVP to manager. And as a manager, he was a pretty good manager. The Indians didn't have very good teams at that time. He won 186 games and lost 189 in 2.5 seasons before he was fired. And of course, he went on to manage many other teams in his career and was about a 500 manager, a little below 500. But he was, one of those great players that garnered a lot of respect in the dugout each game because obviously he performed very well as an MVP caliber player in his day. And he was also a pretty tough manager from what I understand. But on the back of this Topps card, I'm not going to show it here just because I don't want to mess the scene up here, but on the back of the Topps card, it does actually reference him being a player manager, which I thought was pretty cool because the first season he managed was actually 1975. So again, just an example of the magazine showing history as well. And then the last ones I'm going to show here are more fun covers that I wanted to show off. And this one is a sport magazine cover from August 1976 depicting Pete Rose and Joe Morgan in defense of their World Series title. So they had won the title in 1975, the Reds did, and then they were defending their title in 1976. So you can see these two 1976 Topps Joe Morgan and Pete Rose cards here. And in 1976, Joe Morgan would go on to win his second MVP in a row with a .320 batting average, 27 home runs, and 111 RBIs. But he was only 5'7", 160 pounds. And what a lot of people might not know is in that season, he led the major leagues in slugging percentage at 5'7", 160 pounds. I mean, talk about a guy that got the most out of his talents. Just really a remarkable player. And he also had won the Gold Glove that year. And then Pete Rose really wasn't outdone. He led the league with hits with 215, doubles with 42, and runs with 130. And at this point, he was really playing his third season in a row at third base. And Rose would play everywhere. He played second base, he played outfield, he played third base, played some first base later in his career. He would go wherever he had to go to help the team win, and I always had a lot of respect for Pete Rose for that. So by going to third base, he opened up the outfield, I believe, for George Foster on that team. So that was just the kind of guy Pete Rose was on the field. I mean, he certainly had his issues, but just a really fantastic player. So the last fun cover I'm going to show, take this one down, is this sport magazine from December of 1975. It depicts the great Mean Joe Green, and this is the Jaws cover, which is really cool. It's got the shark swimming on the top there, and you see Mean Joe's head below that. And Mean Joe Green at this time was in his 7th of 8 consecutive Pro Bowl seasons. He was the premier defensive tackle in football, along with Alan Page, I would say, and certainly of the 1970s. This was an injury-shortened season for him, though. He only played 9 games. He had a pinched neck nerve and a pulled groin muscle. And I think he missed 4 complete games and part of another game. But Green had a blend of size, strength, and quick feet, really, and just really had this relentless intensity. He would line up in between the center and tackle, and he would just blow his way through. Just one of those really outstanding players of his day, and just had really good technique, and could bowl you over, could run right by you, and really always commanded those double teams and helped the rest of that steel curtain defense get to the quarterback. And he was definitely the key cog in that defense. So just a fun cover, depicts pop culture in that time, of course, with the movie Jaws being released during the summer of 1975. This is a play, obviously, on the famous movie cover from Jaws. So I thought I would share these with you today, do something a little different and fun. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is my 1-year anniversary on YouTube, was on November 22nd. And I just want to thank everybody who supported my channel throughout the year. And I really do appreciate it, and I hope you've enjoyed looking at my collection and hearing my commentary on sports cards and just the history from that time. Thanks, everybody, and have a great Thanksgiving.